Imagine reaching for your toothbrush this morning and instead finding a small clay pot filled with a gritty paste made from crushed mouse brains, burnt rabbit heads, and powdered ox hooves. That was a perfectly normal morning routine for millions of Romans at the height of the most powerful empire the Western world had ever seen. And here is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Some of it actually worked. So how did the most sophisticated civilization of the ancient world end up with that in their medicine cabinet? The answer takes us deep into Roman science, Roman obsession with appearance, and a surprisingly logical, if stomach-turning chain of reasoning. To understand Roman dental hygiene, you first have to understand what Romans actually valued. These were people who built aqueducts stretching hundreds of miles, who had public bathhouses with underfloor heating, who wrote detailed medical encyclopedias. They were not primitive. In fact, Romans were almost obsessively concerned with personal cleanliness and social presentation. Bad breath was considered a serious social failing. Yellowed teeth were a mark of low status. So oral care was not a quirky side interest. It was tied directly to your reputation, your career, your marriage prospects. The pressure to have clean, white teeth was enormous. The man most responsible for documenting Roman dental remedies was Pliny the Elder, a naval commander, obsessive naturalist, and arguably history's greatest list maker. In his colossal encyclopedia called Naturalis Historia, written around 77 AD, Pliny cataloged hundreds of remedies for teeth. He approached medicine the way a modern engineer approaches a problem: observe, collect data, propose a mechanism. His data was sometimes brilliant and sometimes absolutely wild. But the mouse brain entry? That was just one line in a document containing thousands, which raises the obvious question: where did that idea even come from? Here is where it gets genuinely interesting. Roman medicine was not pure superstition. It was a fusion of Greek rational medicine, older Etruscan folk cures, and practical military experience from centuries of treating battlefield wounds. Physicians followed a principle inherited from Hippocratic Greek medicine, that substances which share qualities with a body part can affect that body part. Teeth are small, hard, white. A mouse, in Roman thinking, was also small and, crucially, was believed to have extremely hard, resilient teeth that gnawed through almost anything. So grinding mouse teeth and brain matter into a paste was not random. It was almost logical, in a system where like treats like. This like treats like principle, later called sympathetic medicine, sounds absurd today, but it was the dominant medical logic for over 2,000 years across multiple civilizations. And it produced some treatments that were genuinely effective by accident. Mouse brain happens to contain small amounts of fluoride compounds because mice store minerals in their tissues. Fluoride, as we now know, is the active ingredient in modern toothpaste. Romans had no concept of fluoride. They did not know why it might help, but by following their own strange logic, they stumbled into something that was not entirely wrong. That accident of chemistry is one of the stranger coincidences in the history of medicine. But mouse brain was far from the only ingredient in the Roman dental toolkit, and honestly, it was not even the most extreme. Roman tooth powders, they did not use paste so much as dry powder, were built around abrasives. They used pumice stone, which is volcanic rock ground to fine powder. They used crushed oyster shells and egg shells, both rich in calcium carbonate. They used charcoal. If you removed every ingredient name and just read the function list, mild abrasive, calcium source, carbon compound, you would be reading a description of some natural tooth powders sold in health food stores today. The Romans got the chemistry more right than you might expect. The abrasive component is actually crucial. Tooth enamel accumulates a soft film of bacteria and food residue that dentists call plaque. You need physical abrasion to remove it. Toothbrushes work partly through this mechanism. Modern toothpaste uses very fine silica particles as its abrasive. Roman pumice powder is coarser, and used aggressively, it would have scratched enamel over time. But used gently with a cloth or a chewed twig, the Roman equivalent of a toothbrush, it would have cleaned teeth meaningfully. Archaeologists examining Roman skeletal remains have consistently found lower rates of cavities than in medieval European populations who abandoned some of these hygiene habits. That is not a coincidence. This is one of the most striking findings in the archaeology of Roman health. When researchers at the University of Southern Italy and at sites like Herculaneum examined the teeth of Romans preserved by volcanic ash or dry burial conditions, they found something unexpected. Many showed minimal cavity damage. Some showed almost none at all. These were people eating bread that contained grit from stone-ground grain, already an accidental abrasive, drinking watered wine which has some antibacterial properties, consuming far less refined sugar than any modern population, and actively cleaning their teeth with abrasive powders. The combination was protective in ways the Romans never fully understood. But here is where we have to be honest about the darker side of Roman oral care. Because not every ingredient was neutral or accidentally clever. Romans also used urine, specifically aged fermented urine, as a mouth rinse. And this was not fringe behavior, it was mainstream. Wealthy Romans imported Portuguese urine specifically because it was considered particularly potent. The Roman poet Catullus even mocked a man for using it obsessively. So why urine? Because fermented urine contains ammonia. Ammonia is a base. It neutralizes acids, kills certain bacteria, and genuinely whitens teeth. This was so well understood empirically that urine-based rinses persisted in European medicine into the 18th century. Let that land for a second. Romans were rinsing their mouths with imported fermented urine because the whitening and cleaning effects were observable and real. The chemistry works. The mechanism is sound. And yet from a modern vantage point, it sits alongside crushed mouse brains as something that belongs in a list of ancient horrors. This is the central tension of Roman medicine. It was simultaneously more rational and more revolting than we imagine. They were following evidence. The evidence was just filtered through a completely different conceptual framework than ours. And then there's the part of Roman dentistry that has nothing to do with pastes at all. The part that reveals they understood oral disease better than their remedies suggest. Roman physicians knew that tooth pain often meant decay or infection. Celsus, a Roman encyclopedist writing in the 1st century AD, described dental procedures including tooth extraction using forceps, treating abscesses by lancing them, and even reinforcing loose teeth by binding them to neighboring teeth with gold wire, a technique so structurally similar to modern dental bridging that it surprises modern dentists when they see the archaeological specimens. Gold wire dental work from the Etruscan period, predecessors to and deep influences on Roman culture, dates back to around 700 BC. These were functioning prosthetics and structural supports. The craftsmanship is extraordinary, and they imply something important, that at least among the wealthy, there was a sophisticated enough understanding of tooth loss to invest significant resources in cosmetic and functional repair. Roman dentistry existed on 2 tracks simultaneously, elite technical intervention and folk remedy, and the mouse brain paste lived on the folk track, used by ordinary people who could not afford a trained physician. This class dimension matters enormously. The wealthy Roman with gold wire holding his teeth together and a Greek-trained physician attending to his gums, that person existed. But the vast majority of Romans were ordinary people, freedmen, craftsmen, soldiers, farmers. For them, folk medicine was medicine. The recipes in Pliny were practical guides for people without access to specialists, and those recipes reflect accumulated folk observation over centuries. Some ingredients were inert, some were harmful. Some, like the fluoride in mouse tissue, the ammonia in urine, the calcium in eggshells, were accidentally effective. Think about what it meant to be a Roman living in an insula, one of those crowded multi-story apartment buildings, with no dentist available, no pharmacy, and real grinding tooth pain from a cracked molar. You went to the market, or you consulted a neighbor, or you consulted a text like Pliny, and you used what was available. Mouse, available. Vinegar, available. Burnt animal bones, available. Within those constraints, they constructed the best oral hygiene system they could, and it was arguably better than what came immediately after it in European history, when the collapse of Roman infrastructure pulled personal hygiene practices backward for centuries. Here is the mid-video twist that reframes everything. We tend to look at Roman dental recipes and feel superior. Of course, we know better now. But when Roman civilization collapsed in the West, dental health in Europe measurably got worse, not better. Medieval populations archaeologically show significantly higher rates of dental caries and jawbone infections, than Roman populations did. The rough grain that acted as an abrasive was replaced by softer breads in some regions. The dental cleaning practices documented by Pliny were forgotten or abandoned. The folk knowledge that had accumulated over centuries was lost. Sometimes the strange thing that works is better than the nothing that replaces it. Archaeologists describe this as the medieval dental paradox. Populations with access to more sophisticated cultural institutions somehow ended up with worse teeth than Romans who brushed with mouse brains. The explanation is diet, hygiene habit loss, and the disappearance of the relatively disciplined Roman system of public health. Rome had public baths that Romans visited regularly, social norms enforcing oral cleanliness, and a documented pharmacopoeia. Medieval Europe had none of these in the same organized form. The mouse brain paste, revolting as it is, was part of a system. Rome's public health infrastructure is worth pausing on because it is genuinely staggering in scale. The baths of Caracalla alone could hold over 1,000 bathers simultaneously. The city of Rome had over a dozen major bath complexes, plus hundreds of smaller ones, all fed by an aqueduct system delivering roughly 1 million cubic meters of fresh water daily into the city. Citizens bathed regularly, maintained their hair, trimmed their nails, and cleaned their teeth. Because there were social spaces where these habits were reinforced collectively, oral hygiene was embedded in a broader culture of bodily maintenance, not an isolated eccentricity. The Roman physician Galen, who worked in the 2nd century AD and whose ideas dominated Western medicine for over 1,000 years, was also specific about oral care. He recommended cleaning teeth after every meal with a soft cloth, using tooth powders to remove residue, and rinsing with wine mixed with certain herbs. His reasoning was sophisticated. He understood that food left in teeth caused pain and deterioration over time, even if he described the mechanism incorrectly in terms of humors and corruption rather than bacteria. The observation was right. The microbiological explanation was unavailable to him, and this is the deeper insight hiding inside the mouse brain story. Good science and good medicine are not the same as correct science and correct medicine. Romans made accurate observations about what worked and built practices around them. They were wrong about the mechanism almost every time. Miasma instead of bacteria, sympathetic magic instead of chemistry. But the empirical loop of observe, try, observe again produced real results embedded inside the wrong explanations. Modern science is the process of stripping away the wrong explanations while keeping the results that survive testing. Some Roman dental ingredients passed that test without Romans ever knowing it. Consider the trajectory from Rome to today. Romans used fluoride compounds accidentally through mouse tissue. We now deliberately add fluoride to toothpaste and municipal water after 20th century research proved its enamel-protecting properties. Romans used calcium carbonate from shells as an abrasive. Modern whitening toothpastes use calcium carbonate. Romans used ammonia from urine as a whitener. Modern toothpastes use urea peroxide, which breaks down into, ammonia and hydrogen peroxide in your mouth. The chemistry they discovered by accident, we refined by design. The line from their clay pot to your bathroom cabinet is stranger and more continuous than you ever imagined. Of course, we also discarded the parts that did not work or were actively harmful. Lead, used in some Roman cosmetic preparations, was genuinely poisonous and caused compounding health damage. Some Roman abrasives were too coarse and eroded enamel over time. The remedies for tooth pain that involved incantations or tying knots obviously had no chemical effect whatsoever. Roman medicine was a mixed archive of accidental genius and confident nonsense, and sorting the two required the development of controlled experimentation, which would not arrive until centuries later. Pliny the Elder, who wrote down the mouse brain remedy and hundreds like it, died in 79 AD while sailing toward the eruption of Vesuvius to observe it and rescue survivors. He literally got too close to his curiosity, and it killed him. His nephew, Pliny the Younger, watched from a distance and wrote the only surviving eyewitness account of that catastrophe. Pliny the Elder's last act was scientific inquiry in the face of lethal danger, and his encyclopedia, full of mouse brains and golden observations alike, survived for centuries as one of the most read texts in the medieval world. The strange and the brilliant lived side by side in his pages, as they do in Roman medicine generally. There is something almost moving about that image. The man who cataloged crushed mouse brains and volcanic rocks and the medicinal properties of urine, sailing into history's most famous volcanic eruption with a notebook in mind. He represents something essential about how humans have always engaged with the unknown, with a combination of genuine curiosity, confident wrongness, and occasional brilliant accident. That is not so different from how any scientific era operates, including ours. The specific ingredients change. The human impulse to observe, catalog, and try to fix the pain does not. So the next time you squeeze toothpaste onto your brush, consider the 2,000-year chain of trial and error that led to that tube. Roman soldiers grinding pumice into their teeth before battle. Pliny documenting mouse remedies by lamplight. Medieval scholars copying Galen with ink-stained fingers. 19th century chemists isolating fluoride's protective properties. Every generation took the best guesses of the generation before, kept what worked, and tried to understand why. The Romans did not know about fluoride. They knew mice had strong teeth. And that leaves us with a question worth sitting with. If future civilizations excavate our medicine cabinets, our fluoride gels, our activated charcoal powders, our oil-pulling oils, our ultraviolet tooth whitening trays, how many of our confident routines will look like mouse brain paste to them? How many things do we use daily whose mechanisms we do not fully understand, whose effects we observe empirically, and whose explanations we have half right at best? Romans were not foolish. They were us, working with what they had. The gap between their clay pot and your bathroom counter is smaller than you think, and the gap between your bathroom counter and whatever comes next might be smaller still. What part of your daily routine do you think future people will find most bizarre?